go crazy. They gon' have to lock me up, baby. Nothing they could say could ever.
Her legs ached, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when her stepfather's voice still echoed in her ears, his threats ringing louder than the thunder above. She turned a corner sharply, her shoes skidding against the wet asphalt. The headlights came out of nowhere. The sleek black car was parked at the curb, but she was running too fast to stop. Bam! Wyan's body slammed into the hood with a painful thud before she stumbled backward, barely managing to keep herself upright. The car door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, dressed in black. His presence was like a shadow extending from the night itself. His sharp features were unreadable, but his dark eyes gleamed with something. Wyan sucked in a breath.
I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking.
His head tilted, observing her as if she were an insect that had landed on his windshield.
Clearly.
He muttered, his voice smooth but with something cold. Wyan swallowed. He looked wrong. Not in the way of bad fashion choices or unkempt hair. He was handsome in a way that made it hard to breathe, but in a way that screamed. He stepped closer. Wyan instinctively took a step back.
You're running.
He said simply. She stiffened.
It's none of your business.
His curled slightly.
Oh, but it is. You dented my car.
Wyan glanced at the car's hood, barely noticing the tiny scratch her impact had left.
I'll pay for it, I swear. Just...
A sharp laugh.
With what?
His gaze flicked over her soaked, disheveled form.
You don't even have a jacket, sweetheart.
Wyan clenched her fists.
Look, I really don't have time for this. I'll figure it out later, but right now, I just need to...
He grabbed her wrist. Not roughly, but firmly enough that she felt the raw strength beneath his...
You're scared.
His words made her freeze. She didn't want to confirm it. She didn't want him to know anything about her. But his dark eyes studied her like he already knew.
What are you running from?
His voice was softer now, almost curious.
Let me go.
She said, trying to pull back. Instead, he tugged her closer, just slightly, just enough to send a shiver down her spine.
Not until you answer me.
Wyan's heartbeat pounded in her ears. The fear she had for her stepfather was different from the unease she felt now. With him, she knew what would happen. But this man? He was unpredictable. A distant shout made her flinch. She turned her head quickly. Her stepfather's car had just turned onto the street. Panic surged. She couldn't go back. Not after finally escaping. The man in black followed her gaze. When he looked back at her, something flickered in his expression.
Interesting.
He murmured. Then, as if making a decision, he dropped her wrist.
Get in the car.
Wyan blinked.
What?
His gaze was unwavering.
You want to run, don't you? Then get in.
She hesitated.
Why would I do that?
Because you're out of options.
His tone was calm, like he already knew she would obey.
Unless you'd rather let them catch you.
Her heart hammered. This was insane. Getting into a stranger's car was rule number one of what not to do when running away. But her stepfather's voice was getting closer. Wyan clenched her jaw.
Drive.
He smirked, as if pleased by her choice.
Good girl.
She climbed into the passenger seat, barely shutting the door before the car roared to life. The speed at which he pulled away made her stomach drop.
Minutes passed in silence. The city lights blurred as they sped down the highway. YN sat rigid, her hands clasped together tightly. The man beside her drove effortlessly, one hand on the wheel, his focus unbothered. Finally, he broke the silence.
What's your name?
She hesitated.
YN.
A pause. Then,
I'm Jungkook.
something about the way he said his name sent a chill through her. Like it was supposed to mean something to her. Like it should have scared her. YN turned to him, her instincts screaming.
Why are you helping me?
Jungkook smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes.
Because you interest me.
That wasn't the answer she wanted.
Drop me off somewhere safe.
She said firmly. His fingers tapped the steering wheel.
You think that's a good idea?
She frowned.
Why wouldn't it be?
He glanced at her then, something unreadable in his expression.
Because I don't let go of things that catch my attention.
YN stiffened. That sounded possessive.
You don't even know me.
I will.
His smirk deepened.
We have time.
Dread curled in her stomach. What had she just gotten herself into? The car ride stretched in tense silence. The city lights faded behind them as he drove onto a quieter road, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. YN sat stiffly, her heart racing with the realization that she had willingly placed herself in a stranger's car. She inhaled shakily.
Where are you taking me?
Jungkook smirked, but didn't glance her way.
Somewhere safe.
That's not an answer.
He chuckled softly.
It's the only one you're getting.
Panic flared in her chest.
Pull over.
She demanded. He sighed, tilting his head as if she had just asked for something.
And do what? Drop you on the side of the road so your charming stepfather can find you?
YN's breath hitched. His fingers drummed lazily against the steering wheel.
I wasn't lying when I said I don't let go of things that interest me. YN.
The way he said her name sent a chill down her spine.
Let me go.
She repeated, her voice lower this time. He finally turned his head, dark eyes locking onto hers. The intensity in his gaze made her stomach twist.
No.
Her hands curled into fists.
What do you want from me?
His smirk returned, slower this time, as if he were savoring the moment.
Now, that's the right question.
YN swallowed hard. He leaned back slightly, his hands still expertly guiding the wheel.
I don't do things without a reason, sweetheart.
That nickname sent a shiver down her spine, but she forced herself to focus.
Then tell me the reason.
His. As if he were considering whether she deserved an answer. Then,
I need a distraction.
he murmured. YN frowned.
A distraction?
He nodded, amusement flickering in his gaze.
You see, I have problems.
Her stomach twisted. That much was obvious.
And those problems require a certain kind of solution.
He tapped the steering wheel again, as if contemplating his words.
You, YN, might just be the perfect solution.
She gritted her teeth.
You don't even know me.
He chuckled darkly.
Not yet, but I will.
YN's fingers twitched against her.
You can't just keep me.
His smirk widened.
Can't I?
The casual way he said it sent ice through her veins. The car slowed suddenly, and YN turned to see a massive, gated estate ahead. The wrought iron gate creaked open automatically, allowing them inside. YN's heart pounded.
Where are we?
He parked the car and finally turned to her fully.
Home.
The air left her lungs. He unbuckled his seatbelt but made no move to leave the car. Instead, he studied her like a cat watching a mouse.
You're safe here, YN.
She laughed humorlessly.
Oh yeah? Because you seem so trustworthy?
His smirk was slow, deliberate.
You'll learn soon enough that I don't lie.
Her jaw clenched.
And what if I try to leave?
He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper.
Then I'll have to find a way to make you stay.
YN's breath hitched. She had escaped one nightmare, only to crash straight into another. YN barely had time to process where she was before he got out of the car. She hesitated for a split second, her instinct screaming at her to run, but the sound of his door slamming shut jolted her into motion. She grabbed the handle, yanking at it, locked. He appeared outside her window, looking down at her with amusement. He tapped the glass.
Not so fast, sweetheart.
Her. And fell with panic.
Let me out.
He sighed, shaking his head.
You're not listening. You're safe here.
Safe?
She snapped.
I don't even know you.
His smirk didn't waver.
You didn't know your stepfather either. And yet you lived under his roof.
The words struck deep. His expression darkened, his voice lowering.
Tell me what he did to you, YN.
She swallowed hard. She didn't want to relive it. The screaming, the constant fear. His jaw clenched as if he could already see the answer in her silence.
Stay here.
He turned on his heel, pulling out his phone as he walked toward the estate's entrance. YN pressed her palm against the window, watching him disappear into the house. Something about the way he had said it, stay here, wasn't a request. A pit settled in her stomach. And then her phone buzzed. Her hands trembled as she fished it out of her soaked pocket. One missed call. Stepfather. Her breath caught. A text came through a second later.
You think you can run? You belong to me, YN. Come back now, or you'll regret it.
Crawled up her spine. And then another text. But this one wasn't from her stepfather. Unknown number.
You won't be hearing from him again.
Her. Ran cold. The message was followed by an image. A. Sprawled across a grimy floor. Beneath it, her stepfather. YN's hand flew to her mouth as a gasp escaped her. Her pulse pounded in her ears. A shadow fell over her. She looked up. He was back, standing outside the car, watching her reaction. He opened the door for her, leaning against the frame as if he hadn't just sent her proof of A.
You're shaking.
YN's voice was barely above a whisper.
Him.
He tilted his head.
Did you really think I'd let him after what he did to you?
Her breath hitched.
You didn't even know me.
His fingers reached for her chin, tilting her face up until their eyes met. His was surprisingly gentle.
I didn't have to.
Something deep in his gaze made her shudder. Possession, obsession, protection. She should have been. Should have screamed, should have run. But she didn't. Because for the first time in years, she felt safe. He studied her, his thumb brushing against her jaw.
You don't owe him your fear anymore, YN.
Tears welled in her eyes. She should have told him he was. That she couldn't just accept this. But instead, she whispered,
What now?
his, curled into a smirk.
Now, you stay with me.
YN, in a breath as he leaned in. The moment his, the world tilted. It wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was a claim, a promise, a warning. And YN knew as she melted into that she had just sold her soul to the devil. And she didn't mind.